Good morning, good morning, good morning. This is Marie Holiday, and today is Sunday, October the 25th, 2020. And before I get into this topic, I do want to thank my subscribers and viewers for blocking out time in your morning or either afternoon to follow my channel. And if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. Hit that subscribe button, hit the notification button, so you can be notified of ongoing upload videos. And the time I have is right about 5:20 in the morning. If the audience is aware, I have a babysitting job on the weekend. I'm just getting off of my babysitting job, and I'm gonna go ahead and upload this very valuable video. The topic of this video is going to be, I'm gonna talk about 6 tips to stop gambling addiction. 6 tips to stop gambling addiction. And I also want to let the audience know that my primary job, I am a master level licensed clinical addiction specialist. On my day job, I work and treat with clients who suffer not just from gambling addiction, but other types of addiction to alcohol, drugs. I've been credentialed in working in this field for about 19 years. I'm credentialed in the state as an addiction expert in the state of North Carolina, in the state of Georgia, in the state of Virginia. So you're not just hearing my information from the science side of gambling addiction. You're hearing from an addiction expert. But one of the things I'm going to do, I'm going to deliberately speak in language that any listener would be able to understand. I'm not going to speak all that textbook stuff way up there. I'm going to break this thing down to the audience so you can understand where I'm coming from. So I just want to put that out there. But before I get into this, nope, let me drink my coffee first. It's 5 something in the morning and I'm just getting off of my little babysitting job. And I do want to encourage the audience to subscribe to my channel, support my channel. I created my YouTube channel in June of 2020, and the entire concept of my YouTube channel is where I talk about the importance of holistic financial freedom. I guided the audience through my financial destruction from 2007 to 2012, and I shared with the audience on how God arisen me from my financial destruction. So check out my video, check out my channel. But now I'm getting ready to switch gears. 6 tips to stopping gambling addiction. The first thing is you got to understand, the gambler or the person has to understand the problem. That's the first tip. You cannot fix something you don't understand. You must learn about the issue and admit you have a gambling addiction. You got to admit it to yourself. That's the first step. And before I go any further, I'm going to describe what exactly is gambling addiction. So pay attention. Gambling addiction, first of all, is a powerful need to gamble with larger amounts of money. It's a very powerful need to gamble with large amounts of money. Gambling addiction is also where the person begins to feel restlessness or irritable when they're not gambling. You know, they begin to feel this irritability, this restlessness, this anxiety when they're not gambling. Another description of gambling addiction is when the gambler has made repeated and unsuccessful attempts to quit gambling. They may feel guilt and shame after loss or either winning, and they may tell themselves, this is my last time, I'm not going to return it, I quit, this is my New Year's resolutions, but it does not last. Another description of gambling addiction is the gambler becomes preoccupied with the gambling, and everything centered around gambling, going to the gambling establishment. So there's the preoccupation that develops. The gambler begins to manage stress and depression. When they have symptoms of depression, anxiety, guilt, what they do to relieve those symptoms is gamble. And then it creates more stress, depression, and anxiety. And it's like a vicious cycle. Another description of gambling addiction is the gambler continues to gamble to get even, to recoup the loss. They're not leaving that establishment. They're not leaving that casino. They're not leaving that sweet state. If they went in and lost $500, they're not leaving until they can get even. Another description of gambling addiction is the gambler will lie to friends and co-workers and loved ones about that addiction, about that gambling. They're going to conceal that to anyone that they're even gambling. Is a lot of damage and loss of relationship due to gambling addiction. That's another primary description, loss of relationships because of the gambling. Because now the person is so deep in that damn gambling and creating mountains of debt, now what's going to happen, another primary indicator of gambling addiction, now the person is going to have to borrow money to pay the rent, the light bill, the mortgage, buy food, because they spent all their money gambling and lost it. So that's a thorough breakdown analysis of what gambling addiction is. So now I'm going to talk about the 6 tips to stop gambling addiction. You can follow these recommendations, or you can not follow these recommendations. I'm just going to break it down to you in everyday language. Got to drink the coffee. This is actually my first cup this morning, so you know I got to drink it. Tip number 2, because tip number 1 is you got to first of all understand you got the problem now, and I gave you a description of what gambling addiction is. So tip number 2 to assist a person in stopping gambling addiction is join a support group. Now that you have recognized the problem, that's the biggest step right there. Tip number 1, recognizing the problem. You can seek assistance from a support group, and not just any kind of support group, because there are all types of support groups out there. There's Alcohol Anonymous, there's Narcotic Anonymous, there's Debtors Anonymous. Seek out a support group that is a Gambling Anonymous support group. The group is maintained by people with similar experience gambling addiction. All those support groups do not have professional intervention, but they are free to join. You get support from the group. Within the group, as time goes on, I will also recommend for a person to get a sponsor. That sponsor behaves interchangeable with a coach. You know, if you're having a rough time, you can call them. You can have somebody to talk to who has gone through that journey similar to what you have gone through with that gambling addiction. So a sponsor would be very, very helpful for someone who is a gambling addict. Also, there are many gambling hotlines out there you can call, where you can call them up, get support that way. So that would be a very powerful recommendation. Join a support group, get a sponsor, and use those 1-800 hotlines. Tip number 3, seek professional help. If your gambling has progressed to the point where it's severe, consider seeking professional help as soon as possible. Professional treatment. There's outpatient treatment for this. There's individual counseling from either a mental health professional who specializes in treating gambling addiction, or if that professional has a license in addiction, who with a subspecialty in treating gambling addiction. And this could mean the difference between a life of financial destruction caused by the gambling addiction versus living in financial stability, financial freedom. So tip number 3, seek professional help from a individual who has the credentials to treat addiction and also who is subspecialized in treating someone with gambling addiction. My specialty, I'm a licensed clinical addiction specialist. I also subspecialize in treating people with gambling addiction. So if you, and also a person with gambling addiction can also be getting treatment from a licensed addiction person in addition to going to support groups, because that licensed clinician is going to also recommend that you also be going to a support group at the same time you're getting the professional treatment for your gambling addiction. Just like if you got a toothache, you will go to the dentist. Just like if you got a heart problem, you're going to go to a cardiologist. Just like you got bad eyes, you're going to go to an ophthalmologist. If you are struggling with gambling addiction and it's severe enough, then you may want to consider going to a professional who is credentialed and specialized in treating gambling addiction, ladies and gentlemen. I'm just breaking it down to you. If I got a toothache, I'm not going to go see my mechanic. I'm going to go to a dentist. So if I got a gambling addiction, and if you tried other things and you relapse, or you're not seeing the results you want to see, you might want to look at some other menu of options in order to reclaim your life, to reclaim your livelihood, to reclaim your financial freedom. That's a very important tip number 3 you're hearing from the expert. Tip number 4, which is a very important tip, because the disease of gambling addiction, the disorder of gambling addiction, by the time family members know, that person spent weeks, months, and years concealing their addiction, hiding their addiction. The family don't know, the significant other don't know, loved ones don't know, co-workers don't know. They go to great lengths to conceal the severity of their addiction and the mountain of debt that they have accumulated. So tip number 4, come out of hiding. Self-disclose your gambling addiction to your families and your loved ones, because that's another form of support. Family members and loved ones really do want to see you get better. They really want to see you break the cycle of addiction. So when you release that, when you self-disclose that to family members and friends, that's a huge step on progressing towards recovery. Tip number 5. Tip number 5 is a very important tip, is to find alternatives to gambling. Find healthy, keyword, healthy alternatives to gambling by replacing the gambling behavior, because gambling addiction is a behavioral addiction. So by replacing the gambling behaviors with positive ones, by doing this will allow you to shift your focus away from the bad towards the good. That is very, very important. And I'm going to give the audience some examples of gambling alternatives that a person may use. Physical activity, going for walks, weightlifting, team sports, yoga, meditation, spending time with friends and family who do not gamble, volunteering at a hospital or animal shelter, or exploring new hobbies or revisiting old hobbies. So basically, you're replacing the gambling behavior with healthy alternatives, things that you can do. Tip number 6. And this is the most powerful tip. This is the most important tip, and I'm not going to negate this. Tip number 6 to assist a person to break the cycle of gambling addiction. And I'm here to tell you, because like I said in my first video when I rose out of my financial destruction, I didn't just do that by myself. God, in my faith in God, delivered me from that. So tip number 6, turn your gambling addiction over to God. Have faith in God. I don't care what your belief in, but you need to believe in something beyond you and turn this thing over to God, to your faith. Ask God to pull you and to deliver you from this cycle of gambling addiction. Have faith in God. Because I'm here to tell you, have faith in God to also pull you from this brainwashing that occurs inside of the brain of the gambler. And let me break that thing down to you. What causes the brainwashing is the gambling establishments, the casino, the sweepstakes, all of that gambling. What causes the brainwashing for the gambler is the lights, the sound, the sights, the sensation, the fantasy to win the money. Those are all ingredients to form brainwashing, which leads to the addiction, which leads to the psychological dependency. Psychological dependency is interchangeable with mental obsession. And what I mean by mental obsession, that person can be at work or at a family event. They're there physically, but mentally they're thinking about, I can't wait until I get off work so I can go gamble. I can't wait to get off work so I can go win my money back. I can't wait until this family event is over so I can hurry up and go gamble and win and lose and win again. So it's a form of brainwashing with all of that surrounding gambling. The lights, the sound, the sights, the sensation, which leads to the psychological dependency and the mental obsession, and which leads to the vicious cycle of addiction, mental obsession all the way around. So in knowing that, because a lot is going on up here, whether you realize it or not, you're going to need something a whole lot more powerful than that addiction counselor, than that support group, than that sponsor. You're going to need something a whole lot more powerful than all of that. And what's more powerful than that? Your faith in God to deliver you from the grips of addiction. And I'm here to tell you, bottom line, ladies and gentlemen, those are the 6 tips. Those are the 6 tips on how to break the cycle, how to stop gambling addiction. Real quick, tip number 1, you must first of all recognize and understand that you got a gambling addiction. Tip number 2, join a support group or attain a sponsor. Go a gambling anonymous support group. Tip number 3, seek professional help, not just any kind of professional help, from someone who is licensed in addiction and who subspecializes in treating gambling addiction. Similar to what I said, you will not go to a mechanic if you need a tooth pulled. Tip number 7, come out of hiding if you haven't already done so. I'm sorry. Tip number 4, come out of hiding if you haven't already done so. Tip number 5, find alternatives to your gambling behavior, because I'm here to tell you gambling addiction is a behavioral addiction. And tip number 6, which is the most important, that's one of the reasons why I waited to upload this video on a Sunday. Have faith in God. And I'm here to tell you, your God, to your understanding, will break the cycle of gambling addiction. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you got something out of this. And I encourage, if you know someone who is suffering from gambling addiction, share this video, get the word out. Share this video, get the word out. Hit my subscribe button, hit my notification button. because I'm going to do a series. I'm going to do a series of uploads, about 5 more upload videos in relation to gambling addiction. I'm going to also talk about the co-occurring disorder in gambling addiction, in alcohol and drug abuse, because many times, as an expert speaking, I see co-occurring disorders going on with the gambling addiction, the alcohol, the drug abuse. So I'm gonna do an upload explaining on what alcohol or drug abuse is, in some of the negative effects on that, how you can get treatment for that. I got a lot of more powerful information I got to share. It's too important, it's too valuable to try to put it all in one video. I'm gonna do it in a series of 6 or 7, because I'm here to tell you that there are so many people who are suffering from gambling addiction, alcohol addiction, drug addiction. It's the destroyer of livelihood. It will destroy addiction. It don't just affect the individual. The disease of addiction has an impact on everyone close to you and around you. Your mother, your father, your sister, your brother, your niece, your nephew, your grandparents, your co-workers, your employer. The disease of addiction, when it touched down, it would destroy everything in its path. So I hope you got something out of this. Hit that subscribe button, hit that notification button, and be on the lookout for the additional uploads that I'm going to do in relation to addiction. Simplify. You all have a great morning.